My name is Margaret Holloway, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my life. I was wrong. Dead wrong. At 85 years old. I discovered a secret so profound, so earth-shattering, that it made me question every single day I'd lived before that moment. It all started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in September. I was in my kitchen, making my usual cup of Earl Grey tea, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. Mrs. Holloway? This is attorney Samuel Richardson from Richardson, Wells, and Associates in Portland, Oregon. I'm calling regarding the estate of one Theodore Blackwood. Are you familiar with this name, Theodore Blackwood? I rolled the name around in my mind like a marble in an empty jar. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson, but I've never heard that name before in my life. I think you may have the wrong person. There was a pause, papers rustling. Then his voice came back, more cautious this time. Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you a rather personal question. Were you born on March 15th, 1938, at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago? My blood went cold. How could this stranger know such specific details about my birth? I hadn't lived in Chicago for over 60 years. Yes, but how do you, Mrs. Holloway? I think you should sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you thought you knew about your family. I lowered myself into my kitchen chair, my arthritic hands gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Theodore Blackwood was your twin brother, Mrs. Holloway, and he's left you his entire estate. The words hit me like a physical blow. Twin brother. Impossible. I was an only child. My parents, God rest their souls, had told me countless times that I was their miracle baby, their one and only child after years of trying. There had never been any mention of a twin, of another child, of anything. That's impossible, I whispered into the phone. I don't have a twin brother. I don't have any siblings at all. Mrs. Holloway, I have the birth certificates right here. Both yours and Theodore's. Born 17 minutes apart, on March 15th, 1938. You were babyer. He was baby B. The hospital records are very clear. My mind was reeling. 85 years. 85 years of believing I was alone in this world, that my parents had only me, that I was the sole heir to our family's modest legacy. And now this stranger was telling me I had a twin brother who had just died and left me everything he owned. Mr. Richardson, I need to see these documents. I need proof. This is impossible to believe. Of course, Mrs. Holloway. In fact, Mr. Blackwood left specific instructions that if anything happened to him, you were to be contacted immediately and provided with all the documentation you would need. He also left you a letter, a very long letter, actually. Several pages. He wanted to explain everything he knew about me. Oh yes, Mrs. Holloway. He knew about you his entire life. He'd been searching for you for decades. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers and clattered onto the kitchen table. Searching for me for decades, while I had lived my entire life, believing I was alone. Somewhere out there, a man who shared my DNA, my birthday, my very beginning, had been looking for me. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. Mr. Richardson, I need to know everything. Everything. I can be on a plane to your location tomorrow, Mrs. Holloway. This is far too important and complex to handle over the phone. Where exactly are you located? I gave him my address in Millbrook, a small town in upstate New York where I'd lived for the past 30 years, since my husband Robert passed away. It was quiet here, peaceful, the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. Until now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd learned. A twin brother, Theodore Blackwood, the name, felt foreign on my tongue, yet somehow familiar, like a word in a language I'd once known, but forgotten. I got up and went to my bedroom closet, pulling out the old showbox where I kept my most important documents. Birth certificate, marriage license, Robert's death certificate, my parents' death certificates. I'd looked at my birth certificate hundreds of times over the years, but now I examined it with new eyes. There it was, in faded blue ink. Babia, female, born 3:42 a.m. Baby A not only child or single birth. Baby A, which meant there had been a baby B. How had I never noticed this before? How had my parents explained this? I racked my brain, trying to remember any conversations about my birth, any details they might have shared. But my parents had been private people, not given to sharing intimate details about anything, let alone the circumstances of my birth. My mother, Eleanor Holloway, had been a stern woman, loving in her way, but not demonstrative. My father, Charles, had been even more reserved. They'd both passed away in the 1980s, taking whatever secrets they'd harbored to their graves. The next morning, I was up before dawn, pacing my small living room like a caged animal. Attorney Richardson had said he'd be on the first flight out, which meant he'd arrive sometime in the afternoon. The waiting was excruciating. I tried to distract myself by doing normal things. I watered my plants, organized my medicine cabinet, attempted to read the newspaper, but nothing could quiet the storm in my mind. Every few minutes, new questions would surface. Where had Theodore lived? What had his life been like? Why had we been separated? And most importantly, why had my parents never told me at exactly 2:30 p.m., a black sedan pulled into my driveway. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit emerged, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it weighed more than my cat, Whiskers. Samuel Richardson was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his early 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shook my hand gently, as if he understood that I was fragile, that this entire situation could shatter me if handled roughly. Mrs. Holloway, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know this must be overwhelming. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd spent countless quiet evenings reading, knitting, watching television. Now it felt like a stage set for the most important scene of my life. Richardson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. Before we begin, I want you to know that Theodore Blackwood was a remarkable man. He spent his entire adult life trying to find you, Mrs. Holloway. He never gave up hope. He handed me a photograph, and I nearly dropped it. Staring back at me was a face I recognized, yet had never seen before. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror that showed me as a man. The same gray eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same slightly crooked nose I'd inherited from our father. But where my hair had gone silver, his had remained dark with distinguished streaks of gray. Where my face had softened with age, his had grown angular and sharp. This was taken last year. Richardson said softly, he was 84, just like you. I traced the outline of his face with my finger. My twin brother, my other half, the person who should have shared my childhood, my memories, my family stories. Instead, he'd been a stranger, living a completely separate life just a few states away. Tell me about him, I whispered. Richardson pulled out another document. Theodore Blackwood was a successful businessman. He started with nothing and built a small empire in real estate development. Never married, no children. He told me once that he felt incomplete, like half of him was missing. Now I understand what he meant. He never married. He said he could never fully commit to anyone because he was always searching for something. Or rather, someone. You, Mrs. Holloway. Richardson handed me a thick envelope. My name written across it in careful, masculine handwriting. This is the letter he left for you. He updated it every year, adding new details, new thoughts. The final version is dated just 2 weeks before he passed away. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was my brother's voice, speaking to me across the void of 8 decades of separation. Would you like me to read it to you, or would you prefer privacy? Stay, I said quickly. I don't think I can handle this alone. I opened the envelope and unfolded several sheets of cream-colored paper. Theodore's handwriting was neat, precise. The writing of someone who had taken great care with his words. My dearest sister Margaret, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. If you are reading this letter, then I have passed away, and my attorney has finally been able to locate you. I have dreamed of this moment for 85 years, even though I always hoped we would meet while we were both still alive. I know this must come as a tremendous shock. You probably have no idea that I exist. Just as I had no idea you existed for the first 18 years of my life. Let me start at the beginning and tell you everything I know about us, about our separation, and about the life I've lived always knowing that somewhere out there, my other half was living her own life without me. We were born on March 15th, 1938, at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago. You arrived first at 3:42 a.m. I followed 17 minutes later at 3:59 a.m. According to the hospital records I was eventually able to obtain. We were both healthy babies, though I was slightly smaller than you. Our birth parents were not married. Our mother was a young woman named Catherine Mills, only 19 years old. Our father was a man named James Crawford, 22, who worked at the steel mill. They were not prepared to raise one child, let alone 2. This is where our stories diverge. Margaret, you were adopted by Charles and Eleanor Holloway, a well-established couple who had been trying to have children for years. They took you home when you were just 3 days old. I was not so fortunate. I had to stop reading. The words were blurring through my tears. Richardson handed me a tissue and waited patiently while I composed myself. Take your time. Mrs. Holloway. There's no rush. I continued reading, my brother's voice growing stronger in my mind with each word. I remained at the hospital for 2 weeks because I had developed a minor respiratory infection. By the time I was healthy enough for adoption, the Holloways had already taken you home and were told by the adoption agency that you were a single birth. They never knew about me. I was eventually placed with a family named the Blackwoods. Frank and Marie Blackwood were good people, but they were much older than your adoptive parents. And they struggled financially. Frank worked as a janitor at a school, and Marie took in sewing to make ends meet. They loved me, but life was hard. I didn't learn about you until I turned 18 and gained access to my adoption records. That's when I discovered that I had a twin sister who had been adopted by a different family. The agency told me your name, but said they couldn't provide any other information due to privacy laws. Margaret, I have spent the last 67 years of my life searching for you. I had to put the letter down 67 years, while I had lived my life completely unaware of his existence. He had spent nearly 7 decades looking for me. The magnitude of this revelation was crushing, Mrs. Holloway, Richardson said gently. Would you like to take a break? I shook my head. I needed to hear the rest of Theodore's story, no matter how painful it might be. I started my search with very little money, and even less knowledge about how to find someone. This was long before the internet, before DNA testing, before any of the tools people use today to locate family members. I had to rely on private investigators, phone books, and pure determination. I followed every lead, no matter how small. I contacted every Holloway family I could find in Chicago and the surrounding areas. I placed advertisements in newspapers. I hired 3 different private investigators over the years, spending money I often couldn't afford to spend. In 1962, I thought I had found you. A private investigator located a Margaret Holloway who had been born in Chicago in 1938. I was so excited, so certain that my search was finally over. I drove 8 hours to meet her, only to discover that she was not you. She was kind about it, but I could see the confusion and concern in her eyes when this strange man showed up at her door claiming to be her twin brother. That was the first of many false leads. Over the years, I met 17 different Margaret Holloways. Some were close to the right age. Others had been born in Chicago. A few had even been adopted. But none of them were you. I never gave up hope. Though, even when the trail went cold for years at a time, even when well-meaning friends told me I should focus on building my own life instead of chasing ghosts, I knew you were out there somewhere. I could feel it in my bones, Margaret. I could feel your presence in the world, like a constant, gentle pull toward something I couldn't quite reach. I built my business with the sole purpose of having the resources to find you. Every dollar I earned, every property I developed, every success I achieved was motivated by the hope that someday I would have enough money and influence to locate my sister. In 1995, I hired a genealogist who specialized in adoption cases. She was expensive, but she was also brilliant. She was the one who finally discovered that you had married and changed your name to Holloway Patterson, and later, after your husband's death, back to just Holloway. She was also the one who found out that you had moved to New York. But by the time we tracked you to New York, you had moved again and again. It seemed like every time we got close. You had relocated to a new town, a new state. I began to wonder if somehow, subconsciously, you were running from me just as desperately as I was searching for you. The breakthrough came just 5 years ago, when DNA testing became widely available. I submitted my DNA to every major testing service, hoping that someday you might do the same. I waited and waited. I checked my results every single day for 3 years. And then, 18 months ago, there you were. Margaret Holloway, 99.9% DNA match, predicted relationship, twin sibling. I stared at that computer screen for hours, afraid that if I looked away, you might disappear again. But I didn't contact you immediately. By then, I was 83 years old, and I had learned patience. I hired another private investigator to learn about your life before I reached out. I wanted to understand who you had become, what kind of life you had built. What I learned filled me with both joy and sorrow. Joy, because you had lived a good life. You had married a man named Robert Patterson, who clearly adored you. You had been a teacher for 37 years, touching the lives of countless children. You had friends, a community, a life filled with purpose and meaning. But I also learned that you had struggled with infertility, that you and Robert had never been able to have children of your own. This broke my heart, Margaret, because I realized that if we had grown up together, you would have had me. You wouldn't have felt so alone in the world. I also learned that Robert had passed away 15 years ago, and that you had been living alone ever since. This knowledge tormented me. While you were grieving the loss of your husband, dealing with that profound loneliness, I was just a few states away, equally alone, equally longing for family connection. I drafted 100 letters to you over the past 18 months. I picked up the phone to call you countless times, but I was terrified. Margaret, what if you didn't want to know me? What if learning about me only brought you pain? What if, after all these years of searching, you rejected me? So I waited, and I planned. I decided that I would leave everything to you in my will, and if something happened to me before I found the courage to contact you, at least you would know that you had been loved, that you had been searched for, that you had never been forgotten. I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm sorry that I wasn't brave enough to reach out while I was still alive. I'm sorry that we never got to meet, never got to share our stories, never got to be the siblings we should have been from the beginning. But I want you to know that you have been the driving force of my entire life. Every decision I made, every goal I set, every dream I pursued was connected to my hope of finding you someday. You gave my life meaning, even though you never knew I existed. I'm leaving you everything I own because you are my family. You are the only family I ever had, even though we never met. My estate is substantial, several $1 million, plus properties in Oregon, California, and Arizona. But more than The money. I'm leaving you something else. Proof that you were loved unconditionally by someone who shared your first breath in this world. There are more documents in this package. Photos of me throughout my life, so you can see how we aged. Differently yet similarly. Medical records, in case there are genetic factors you should know about. And a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Portland, where I've kept mementos and documents related to our search for each other. I hope that learning about me brings you some comfort. Margaret, I hope it helps you understand that you were never truly alone in this world. Somewhere, always, there was someone who shared your DNA, your birthday, your beginning, and who loved you with a devotion that never wavered. If there is an afterlife, I will be waiting for you there. And finally, we will get to be the twins we were meant to be. With all my love and a lifetime of longing, your brother. Theodore, I folded the letter carefully and sat in silence for several minutes. Richardson didn't speak, didn't move, just let me process the enormity of what I had just learned. Finally, I looked up at him. How much did he leave me? The estate is valued at approximately $4.2 million, Mrs. Holloway. There are 3 properties. A house in Portland, where he lived, a vacation home in Sedona, Arizona, and a small apartment building in San Francisco that generates rental income. There are also various investments, savings accounts, and personal belongings for $1 million. I have been living on Social Security and a small pension from my teaching career, carefully budgeting every month to make ends meet. And now, suddenly, I was wealthy beyond anything I had ever imagined, but the money felt secondary to everything else. The knowledge that I had had a brother, that he had loved me, that he had spent his entire life searching for me, that was worth more than any inheritance. Mr. Richardson, I need to see where he lived. I need to understand his life. Of course, I can arrange for you to fly to Portland whenever you're ready. The house is exactly as he left it. He gave specific instructions that nothing was to be disturbed until you had a chance to see it. 3 days later, I was on an airplane for the first time in 20 years, flying across the country to see the life my brother had built while searching for me. Theodore's house was a beautiful craftsman style. Home in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by oak trees and carefully tended gardens. Richardson met me at the front door and handed me a set of keys. Take all the time you need, Mrs. Holloway. I'll be waiting in the car. I unlocked the front door and stepped into my brother's life. The house was immaculate, decorated with simple, elegant furniture and filled with books. Hundreds and hundreds of books lined the walls of every room. But it was the photographs that took my breath away. There were pictures of me everywhere. Not recent photos. Theodore couldn't have obtained those. But school pictures from my childhood that he must have somehow acquired from my adoptive parents' estate sale. My high school graduation photo. My wedding picture with Robert. Photos of me at various school events during my teaching career, probably taken from old yearbooks or newspaper articles. He had been documenting my life from afar, collecting evidence of my existence like precious artifacts in his bedroom, on The nightstand next to his bed was a framed photo of two babies lying side by side in a hospital bassinet. We couldn't have been more than a day old. Someone, a nurse, perhaps, had written Baby and Baby B, March 15th, 1938 on the back. I stared at that photograph for a long time. There we were, Theodore and I. Together for what might have been the last time, until this moment, 85. Years later, two tiny beings who had shared the same womb, the same first breath, the same beginning, but who had been separated by circumstances beyond our control, dot in his study. I found the evidence of his search for me. Filing cabinets filled with documents, maps, correspondence with private investigators, newspaper clippings, phone records. He had kept meticulous records of every lead he had followed, every dead end he had encountered, every small victory and crushing disappointment. There was a timeline on the wall, marked with important dates in both our lives. My graduation from college, my marriage to Robert, Robert's death, my retirement from teaching. Somehow, he had managed to track the major events of my life, celebrating my successes from afar and mourning my losses in solitude. But the most heartbreaking discovery was in his bedroom closet. Hanging there, still in its original packaging, was a woman's sweater, size medium, powder blue, with a note attached, for Margaret, Christmas 1987. I hope she likes blue. There were dozens of gifts like this, purchased over the years for birthdays and holidays, wrapped and ready to give to a sister he had never met. Jewelry, books, scarves, perfume, a lifetime of undelivered presents, tokens of love for someone who didn't even know he existed. I sat on his bed and wept. For him, for me, for all the years we had lost, for all the conversations we would never have, for all the memories we should have shared but never could. But even in my grief, I felt something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that he had never stopped looking for me. Gratitude that he had loved me so completely, so unconditionally, even though we were strangers. Gratitude that, in the end, he had found a way to reach me, to let me know that I had never been alone in the world. I spent 3 days in Theodore's house, reading through his papers, looking at his photographs, trying to understand the man who had been my other half. I learned that he had been generous with his money, donating regularly to charities that helped reunite families. I learned that he had been a mentor to young entrepreneurs, helping them build their own businesses. I learned that he had been well respected in his community, known for his integrity and kindness. But I also learned that he had been profoundly lonely. His diary entries, which he had kept faithfully for decades, revealed a man who felt incomplete, who went through the motions of a successful life, while always feeling like something essential was missing. Had dinner with the Johnsons tonight, read one entry from 1994. They're nice people, but I felt like an outsider looking in on their family happiness. I wonder what Margaret is doing tonight. I wonder if she ever feels this same emptiness, this sense that half of her is missing. Another entry from 2003 saw twins at the grocery store today, probably about 8 years old, arguing over which cereal to buy. Their mother was exasperated, but I envied her. I would have given anything to have had those kinds of silly arguments with Margaret when we were children. And from 2015, another Christmas alone. I bought Margaret a present again this year, even though I still don't know how to find her. It's become a tradition now, this ritual of hope. Maybe next year will be the year I finally get to give her all these gifts. On my last day in Portland, I visited Theodore's grave. He was buried in a small cemetery overlooking the city, under a simple headstone that read, Theodore Blackwood, 1938 to 2023, beloved brother. I knelt beside his grave and spoke to him for the first time. I'm here. Theodore, I'm finally here. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry we never got to meet. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand why I always felt like something was missing from my life. It was you. It was always you. I placed a bouquet of flowers on his grave. Daisies, which I had learned from his diary, were his favorite flowers. I'm going to take care of everything you left me. I'm going to honor your memory. And I'm going to make sure that other families don't have to go through what we went through. I'm going to use your money to help reunite people who have been separated, so that maybe some other brother and sister won't have to wait 85 years to find each other. When I returned to New York, I was a different person. The knowledge that I had had a brother, that I had been loved so completely by someone I had never met, had fundamentally changed how I saw myself and my place in the world. I used part of Theodore's inheritance to establish the Blackwood Holloway Foundation, dedicated to helping families separated by adoption, fostering, or other circumstances find each other. I hired genealogists, private investigators, and social workers to assist people in their searches for lost family members. Just in the first year alone, we helped reunite 43 families. Siblings who had been separated in foster care, birth, parents and children who had been divided by adoption, grandparents who had lost contact with grandchildren. Each reunion was a small miracle, a victory against the forces that tear families apart. I also kept Theodore's house in Portland, visiting it several times a year. I turned his study into a memorial room, displaying the timeline of our parallel lives and the documentation of his search for me. I wanted people to understand the depth of his devotion, the magnitude of his love for a sister he had never met, but perhaps most importantly, I finally understood that I had never been alone. Even when I felt most isolated, most disconnected from the world, there had been someone out there who shared my DNA, my history, my beginning. Someone who was thinking about me, searching for me, loving me from afar. Theodore had spent 67 years looking for me, and in the end, he had found me. Not in the way he had hoped, not while we were both still alive, to enjoy each other's company, but he had found me nonetheless. His love had reached across the void of our separation, and touched my life in ways I was still discovering. I often wonder what our lives would have been like if we had grown up together. Would we have been best friends? Or would we have driven each other crazy, the way siblings sometimes do? Would we have supported each other through life's challenges? Celebrated each other's successes? Been there for each other during our darkest moments? I'll never know the answers to those questions. But I do know this. Theodore Blackwood was the most devoted brother a sister could ask for. He loved me unconditionally, searched for me tirelessly, and ultimately found a way to take care of me even after his death at 85 years old. I discovered that I had never been alone in this world. I had a twin brother who spent his entire life loving me, and that knowledge has filled a void in my heart that I didn't even know existed. Theodore left me everything he owned. But what he really left me was something far more valuable, the understanding. That love doesn't require proximity, that family bonds can transcend time and distance, and that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones we never get to meet. I am Margaret Holloway, and I am no longer alone. I have a brother named Theodore Blackwood, and even though he's gone, his love for me continues to shape my life every single day. In his final diary entry, written just a week before he passed away. Theodore wrote, "I may never meet Margaret in this life, but I know that someday, somehow, we will be together. And when that day comes, I will finally be whole. Theodore, my dear brother, I am counting the days until that reunion. Until then, I will carry your love with me, and I will make sure that your legacy of devotion and hope lives on through the families we help find each other. You found me, Theodore. After 85 years, you finally found me, and I will spend whatever time I have left making sure that your love was not in vain. This is our story. The story of two babies who shared their first breath, who were separated by circumstances beyond their control, and who found each other again through the power of unconditional love and unwavering determination. It's a story about the bonds that connect us, even when we don't know they exist. It's a story about never giving up hope, even when hope seems impossible. And it's a story about the profound truth that we are never truly alone in this world, even when we feel most isolated. At 85 years old, I learned that I had a twin brother who left me everything. But what he really left me was the knowledge that I had been loved completely and unconditionally for my entire life. And that, more than any inheritance, more than any material wealth, is the greatest gift anyone could ever receive.